Okay, so first of all, we will need to get a reference to our player inside this pause screen. So in variables, we will just create one called player reference, and this will be BP player object reference. And make sure that this player reference is a public variable. Now we can go to BP player into our initialization function. And here where we are creating this main UI widget, we are setting it as a variable and we are adding it to the viewer. We can do the same thing for our pause screen, but without adding it to the viewer. So let's create widget and select our pause screen. Oh, I forgot that inside this pause screen, we need to make this variable not only instance editable, but we also need to make sure that this is exposed on spawn. When we click expose on spawn, this variable will be visible here. And as for play reference, we can just get reference to self. And now we can also promote this variable called pause screen reference. But we're not adding it to the viewport yet because we will do that only when we pause the game. So let's go to the event graph. We can close these two functions. Actually, we don't need them anymore. And now we need to find some empty space, let's say here. And we need to get that input action pause game. But pausing the game with escape key will not work perfectly while testing because escape key is used to close the game in editor. So what we can do is we can just grab debug key, like for example backspace maybe. So this backspace key debug will only work when we are editing, when we are in Unreal Engine editor. So let's create a branch and we will just go from this backspace and we will go from this pause game. So when we package the actual game, this will work, but now when we're testing this in editor, this backspace key will work as our pause input. So why are we creating a branch? Because first of all, we want to know if the game is paused. So we can search for is game paused and connect this here. So if the game is paused, we want to unpause the game when we press escape, and when the game is not paused, we want to pause it. So let's start from false. When this game is not paused, we want to pause the game. So first of all, we will get a reference to main UI because we want to hide this main UI. So we will set visibility of this main UI to be hidden. This should be from false. So this main UI is hidden. Our crosshair, our stamina bar, everything will be hidden when we pause the game. Then we can actually get this pause screen reference, and we can finally add this to viewport. Okay, let's see if this actually works. So we'll see the menu for the first time in the actual game. Now when I press backspace, yeah, you can see my UI disappeared and this game pause screen appeared and it's blurring the background and looks very nice. But also there are some issues. First of all, we can play the game, we can walk around and do all of that stuff. So what we need to do is we need to get player controller and we need to set input mode. This time it will be game and UI. This is really important because if this is not set to game and UI, we won't be able to press escape to exit the pause screen. And one more important thing, when we click on this debug key backspace, we need to make sure that this execute when paused is set to true. And same thing for our input action pause game. When we double click on that, we need to make sure that trigger when paused is set to true. Okay, let's go back to our BP player. And after setting our input mode to game and UI, we can show mouse cursor. So set show mouse cursor and we need to check this true. So let's see how this works. Now when we're in the game, when I press backspace, I'm in the UI and I see my my mouse and I can click these buttons. Okay, sweet. But as you can see, this mouse is appearing in a random position. I mean, when we click like here, we press backspace, this mouse is appearing here. But we want this mouse to appear in the center when we pause the game. So in order to do that, we will just get this player controller and from here we will set mouse position. Okay, and as you can see, we have two inputs for the mouse position X and Y. And in order to calculate that, first of all, we will get viewport size. Okay, and now we can split this value, which will give us two values, x and y, of size of our viewport. So in order to center them, what we need to do is we can divide this by 2 and do the same thing here. Divide this by 2, so it'll be in the middle of our screen. And now we can just connect these two values, and they will automatically create a translate node for us. Do the same thing here. So now when I press compile, save, now when I press play and I press backspace, you can see my mouse is exactly in the middle. That's exactly what we need. And then after doing all of that, we can finally set game paused to be true. So let's see if this works. Press play. I can walk around and do all of that stuff. My camera is moving because we have this head bobbing. When I press backspace, game is pausing. We cannot move. The camera is not moving. The only thing we can interact with is our pause screen. So this is all happening whenever the game is not paused. But what's going to happen when the game actually is paused? First of all, we will set game paused to false. We don't need to be pausing the game anymore. Then we need to get our player controller, because we need to set input mode to game only, so we cannot interact with any UI while in the game. After setting the input, we need to change this visibility back to visible of our main UI. So we can copy this, and here we will set it to not hit testable self and children. So not hit testable means we cannot hit it, but it is visible. Now we also want to hide our pause screen. So we can get pause screen reference and just remove from parent, which will remove this from the viewport. And finally, we can hide our mouse cursor. So let's just get player controller and show mouse cursor to false. Okay, so now when I press play and I press backspace, our game is paused. We cannot interact with anything except these buttons. And then I press pause key again, and we're back here. Everything's working. We have our crosshair and our entire UI back again. We can walk around and we can pause the game, unpause the game, pause the game, unpause the game. Everything looks very, very nice. But these buttons, they do not have any functionality yet. So let's change that. Before we actually dive into this pause screen again, we can create a custom event quickly here called on pause game, and we can connect it here to this set game paused false, because now we can call this event from our pause screen and this entire code will happen. So let's go to WB pause screen, and here where we have this resume button, we can just do unclicked. Now we can grab our player reference and we can call that custom event, so on pause game. When we press resume button, we are just calling all of this to happen. Let's see if that works. Resume, yep, everything's working fine. And as for the quit button, we can also do unclicked. And here we could also quit the game with just quit game, but I want to go back to our main menu whenever we press the quit button. So in order to do that, what we can do is we can go back to designer and we can create new black screen. So add a image, place this image in the canvas panel, anchor this to the entire screen, reset the offsets, change the tint to black, and make sure it's not hit testable. Now let's change the render opacity to be 0, and let's name this black screen. Let's make this a variable. Now we need to create a simple animation for that. Black screen fade. Select this animation, add our black screen, add our render opacity, and we'll go from 0 to 1 during half a second. Compile, save, exit the animation. Now let's go to the graph where we have this animation black screen fade. We can now just play animation, connect it here. Then we can add a delay of 1 second, and we can open level by object reference, which will be our main menu. And as for the main menu, we can also just quickly grab player controller to set input for UI only, and also show mouse cursor. Connect it here, set the mouse cursor to true. So now when we press play, I pause the game, I can resume the game with the button, obviously, of course, everything is working. And now we can also press backspace, and when we press quit, you can see we are going back to the main menu. And from here we can click play, load this level again, pause, quit the game, back to main menu. So everything is working together perfectly fine.